The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by crypto educator Nick Aston. Nick has his own podcast called Ashton Talks Crypto, where he works through queries and the kinds of questions that people have around crypto and crypto investing. We chat about the growing interest from the more mature, experienced investors who are looking to dip their toe and maybe even jump headlong into the world of cryptocurrency investing. We also think about a few years down the tracks and how this sector is likely to develop and what will be the key points that will have happened to allow that development to occur, one of which we think is probably going to be the pending markets and crypto assets regulation and regulation generally coming down the tracks for cryptocurrencies. So with that, let's get on with the show.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hi, Nick. Welcome to the Aquest Podcast.
Hello. Yes. Thanks for having me on, Daniel.
Well, it's great to have you here. I have to warn you now before we start that I'm just finishing up the Billy Connolly autobiography.
Okay.
I feel I could slip into swearing and tangential stories at any moment. So you gotta keep the straight.
That sounds good to me.
This is a family podcast.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I was at the early days of Billy Connolly. I was never really getting it, But in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been following him intensely, and it kind of really makes sense. I mean, maybe it's just that I'm getting older. I don't know, and I understand it more. But I just find him hilarious now. But there's an element of kind of something that's underlying with what he does, that kind of really makes you connect with, today's society or yesterday's society, I suppose, that I didn't get in the past.
Yeah, he's a fantastic performer. His ability to do it all unscripted and without much in the way of a plan.
Yes.
Years anyway is phenomenal. Like how doesn't die of a heart attack every night before he's
incredible. It's incredible.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Nick, and tell us about the podcast and your education.
Yeah, okay. So basically, that started because of the pandemic. So I kind of started studying crypto. I started looking at blockchain because people were telling me to, have a look in this space. This is where it's going to be in the future, especially in the sales industry. So I took a couple of courses on blockchain and crypto, went into that and started studying it. And what I found very quickly, Danny, was that there seems to be a massive gap between the crypto geeks, the enthusiasts, the techie people that understand all of this kind of thing.
The believers, Nick.
Sorry?
The believers.
Well, no, exactly. But also these people, they probably come, or they have come from a technical background. So it was easier for them to kind of, like the IT guys, people that have been in IT, it was an easy transition for them into crypto. So they understand that there's a jargon world, there's this kind of different language that they speak. But a gap between that and then, people like me, the general public, and also, I've worked a lot in the past few years in sales with investors, property investors, things like that. And I'm thinking, well, one of the things I did notice, Danny, in crypto was that there's a lot of platforms where you can start to, simply invest into cryptocurrency and buy some Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever it may be. But there's no kind of interface to be able to actually chat and talk to people, or unless you go out and find out more information yourself, there's no real space to kind of find out exactly what's going on here. And then you talk about the older, more savvy, generic investors, the ones that have invested in the past in commodities and things like that. Again, the whole crypto and blockchain industry just simply goes over the top of their head. So I'm thinking, well, there's got to be a niche here or a space that somebody should create that kind of bridges that gap between the crypto geeks and these people that are in this industry and the general public and the generic investors that kind of want to understand it more and relate to it more, which of course then in turn hopefully brings more trust into it. And of course, getting these people that are the generic investors to maybe invest as a part of their portfolio into that. So I created a podcast. Well, initially it wasn't a podcast, it was a space called Ashton Talks Crypto on social media, where I started to kind of put on kind of little explainer videos and then post them onto social media, and write a few articles that I started posting onto LinkedIn and things like that. And then obviously moving on from then, I created the Ashton Talks Crypto podcasts. And what I do with those, and I'm about 6 or 7 podcasts in, so it's still fairly at an early stage, and I'm still learning from it as well. But what I'm doing is I'm inviting guests onto the show that are what you would call in the crypto industry. They have either a crypto business or a blockchain business, or they're heavily into the education space. But before I invite them on, we have a good chat about how we can talk about this in layman's terms, or in a language that everybody can understand. And it's kind of gone from strength to strength, really. So I've been kind of, this profile has grown organically over the last 15 months and is kind of really going well. And I'm well into the space. And of course, something that I may not have thought would be very appetizing or of interest to me in the past is very, so I'm kind of well and truly entrenched into the space of cryptocurrency and blockchain now. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
And what would the typical profile of somebody who engages with that platform be? Do they tend to be I'm assuming they're not the techies if they're kind of already up to speed. Is it the younger population, or are you increasingly finding it's what you call the more generic investor, the kind of maybe more experienced investor who's now in other asset classes and now is looking towards crypto as well, at least interested of it's for them?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it started off because I've got a big kind of following, I suppose, LinkedIn following especially, and social media with the generic investor, so the commodities investor, the more mature investor, property investor, things like that. So they're the ones that are asking the questions, Danny. So when I'm putting these podcasts out, they're the ones that are then kind of commenting, saying that was great, and I really understood that, and it's kind of something that I was looking into. And some of the questions that were raised in your podcast answered those questions. I don't get any real feedback from the techies because, of course, they're already in the space, and it's probably the way that I do it is, I suppose not on the level that they would normally want to talk about, because there are podcasts out there from, crypto to crypto people, and it's all about the charts and the figures and how much it's going to be in the future, how, what downturn, bull runs, bear markets. They're going through all of that techie stuff. So, and there doesn't seem to be anything out there that I'm actually doing, which is good. But I suppose, for want of a better word, the fan base is growing the way that it should be growing. The way that I envisaged it to grow is to kind of start getting the attraction of the generic investors, or just the general public, people that have, I suppose, gone a little bit into investment by investing in ISAs and things like that in the past, or maybe dabbled in a little bit of Forex or things like that. So these are the people that I'm reaching out to. That's my kind of target audience, so to speak.
And what kind of questions do they have? Are they mostly around the technical side, trying to understand what Bitcoin is or cryptocurrencies are and how they work, or what blockchain is, or is it around the risks and fraud and crypto fraud? And
yeah, absolutely. It's never about the technical stuff, because I kind of look. I mean, we're coming to a part. The last part, I suppose, the pandemic, again, talking about that, is the last couple of years there's been a big surge in how cryptocurrency, a lot of more people want to find out more about it, because again, they're sitting at home and they're kind of reading, they're going on the internet more. It's becoming more high profile on mainstream media. Countries are starting to adopt it, MasterCard, Visa. So it's becoming more and more kind of in the forefront of what people can actually see. So nevertheless, it's never about, well, come on then, how does this crypto thing work then? What's the technology behind it? It's more about the typical questions that an investor would ask, is what are the risks? What's the risk status of this? How do we know that it's not going to crash and disappear? And obviously some of these questions you can never answer. But they are the typical questions. It's, with other investors in commodities that I've dealt with in the past. Is how many different types of investment are there, and are there exit plans? And big one at the moment, huge one at the moment, is regulation. Because of course the crypto industry, there are things in place to categorize what crypto is and what blockchain is, or especially crypto, but there's no real regulation or legislation in place. 2022 seems to be that it's going to be the year for that. And I feel then that the people that are asking these questions, they're listening to the people that they trust. They listen to the news, they listen to the institutions like Barclays Bank, the regulatory bodies that are involved that they've always been, entrusted with. But no, they're the sort of questions that they're asking, really.
So I guess there's quite a lot of overlap with the questions an experienced investor would ask of a more traditional asset class.
Yeah.
With something like a cryptocurrency about, likely future performance, availability of assets. But then I guess there's also a layer of questioning that applies to crypto that maybe doesn't to traditional assets, which is around because of their unregulated status. What are the additional risks there? How do I know I can trust this platform or this exchange or this provider? How do I know this crypto exists? Is that part of the conversation too?
Always. It always is. And, there are a lot of companies out there that are, that have platforms. I think one of the things, Danny, as well, is that, we're moving massively towards this digital world now. Again, we were talking about kind of working from home, and, you just, switch on your laptop and everything's in front of you. And what comes along with that as well are, digital dashboard interfaces, chat bots. When you want to speak to somebody, you get a chat bot that doesn't answer your question, and that's where the crypto industry is. Where if you look at the investor that were the commodity investor, they had wealth managers. They had people that and the wealth managers had offices down their local street. They could walk down the street, knock on the door, go and sit down and build up a relationship, a personal relationship with their wealth manager. Which is a huge thing that's missing in this industry. And it's not that it's not going to happen, and that's something that the industry doesn't want. It's just that we are living in a different digital world now, and people seem to be fairly happy with the transition into just dealing with robots or digital interfaces and things like that. So although there is this crossover going on and those kind of simple questions are coming in, there are some underlying layered questions of those. Well, I can't really physically seem to speak to anybody, but the people that I'm talking to that are asking the questions, because it's so traditional. And if we look at Britain, for example, dealing with property in the UK, some investors wouldn't think twice about, putting 5 or 6 million into a property development in the UK, having just, spoken to them once over the telephone. And so that's not really an issue with the people or the trustworthiness of the company. It's because they trust that industry. They say that saying, Brits love bricks, so it's been the big investment for hundreds of years that everybody apparently should get into. So there's a movement going on now, which would probably take some time to sway people into thinking, right, the bigger thing as well, the bigger picture here is the cryptocurrency investment, the return on investment that you get from Bitcoin, as an example, has gone up 6,500%, since its inception back in 2009. Now, property investment investors have never known. They're happy with 6 or 7% a year yield, So trying to kind of explain to them, no matter how you do it or which company it is very difficult for them to understand it. But if Barclays Bank came to them tomorrow and said, look, we are now putting everything into cryptocurrency, into Bitcoin, for example. The return on investment is amazing. You're going to make 1,000% a year. There are other tokens out there that you can do this with as well that give phenomenal returns on investment. The investors would then believe it because they believe in that institution of Barclays Bank, Lloyds Bank. So that's the direction that I suppose it needs to go into. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of drip feed into the industry. So we need the big bodies involved. We need the corporations, the people, the companies that people trust. To go, invest into Bitcoin. And then all of these millions that they've been investing in the past into property and commodities and gold and things like that would start filtering through to cryptocurrencies, I would imagine.
And where do the seasoned investors go at the moment for advice on independent, trustworthy advice on investing in digital assets or cryptocurrencies or NFTs? Like, is it to their wealth manager, or
yes.
Are they entirely dependent on websites and bots and that kind of thing? Where, as you said, that the level of trust isn't built up yet.
Yeah, probably about 90% of it is still go out there and find it for yourself. When you look at the wealth manager as an example, a lot of them, trying to find the right word here, but a lot of them are quite mature and are themselves also going through this journey of this transaction of the digital age that we're all going through, really. So they're kind of edgy. They're a bit kind of, some of them, I suppose, will be throwing themselves wholeheartedly into it. Some of them won't. So I'm presuming that it's, they're dependent on the wealth manager that you know. But having said that, there's a lot more content going out on social media, especially LinkedIn, with regards to well-established companies. I hope you don't mind me naming. There's a company called De Vere, which most people have heard of. One of the most established wealth management companies, independent financial advisors, whatever you want to call them. They've thrown everything wholeheartedly into crypto now. It's all about crypto. And they're building up portfolios. And of course, they've got a huge backtracking of investors that have invested with them in other commodities and things in the past. So they're selling the crypto like I've never seen. They really are going for it, which is great to see. So you've got a huge company like that. But for the kind of smaller IFA wealth manager down the street that somebody's attached to, it's kind of hit and miss of whether they're promoting it or not. I mean, there are still quite a lot of people out there saying don't go anywhere near it. It's all going to crash and burn. You're going to be in tears. And don't believe all of these big returns, because when you see big returns like that, it's inevitable that the bubble's going to burst and all of these kind of things. So it's a difficult one. And I my thinking is, the big establishments, the big banks. There was an article a few days ago that now 50% of the world's biggest banks are looking at or have already implemented some kind of crypto into their banking system. So that's probably going to get more. So the trust is going to come more into place. But yeah, there's no. I mean, the space that I've got, to be honest with you, is simply an education. We don't promote any real type of. We don't advise financially. We just give education onto there. There are platforms, if people ask and say, well, look, okay, if I've got this amount of money, I want to invest in it, then I could advise and give them a few options. But other than that, it's more of an education space.
And when the experienced investor has got to the point where questions have been answered and they're comfortable enough to go forward with an investment in crypto, is it very much a toe in the water kind of approach? a small amount and let's see how it goes, or do they jump 2 feet in and see what happens?
Yeah, I think again the majority, I would say 90% is the toe in the water. Start off with minimal. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the major iCards or internet cards that you can get now, without mentioning any names, is that you can. There's a platform on their card where you can buy some Bitcoin and you can buy a tenner's worth. So you can kind of start dabbling into different types of currency just on your normal banking card. There are the smaller platforms which is just click and go, I call them. You just go online, you sign up to the company, they give you a crypto wallet, and then you just enable, you can buy a couple of £100 worth of Bitcoin and then just start moving across from there. That's a very good question, actually, Danny, because what I'm seeing still at the moment is this group or, a big group of people that are investing on that level, a couple of £100 here just to start off with. And that's fine. And that's great. But there's nothing really in the middle. And what I mean in the middle is the next one that we see that comes along are the people like Elon Musk. Or the Warren Buffetts that are investing millions. Companies like Michael Saylor, who is a big Bitcoin buyer, one of the biggest Bitcoin buyers in the world, that they're buying hundreds of millions in one go. But that's the whole idea of me with this space, is that I want to be talking to the people with 10 grand, 30 grand, 100 grand, or more of €1,000 or €2,000 that have that trust element already in place, that they're it's worth a punt. It's worth giving it a go on that, based on obviously the type of company that they're dealing with. As I said, there's a lot of companies out there, but that middle ground kind of doesn't seem to be there at the moment. It probably is for very few people, but not for the amount that you would actually notice. So that's the space that I'm looking at. That is the space, yeah.
And so if you look 5 years forward, let's say, how do you envisage the investment portfolio looking then for your average experienced investor? Do you think crypto is going to be a feature that will be there as much as bonds and equities and property, and something that people will trust in? And what are the things that have happened in those 5 years to get from where we are today to it being a trusted and valued asset?
Yes. Yeah, at the moment it is being pitched as an alternative investment as part of a portfolio. So diversing your portfolio of investments. So you've got a bit of gold, you've got a bit of you on the stock exchange, you've got some property that you rent out. Now is time to start thinking about the crypto, maybe in a small way to start off with. But we're looking at what I call a huge revolution going into the digital age and cryptocurrency now, which I think 5 years it will be full adoption. I mean, that's my belief, and I suppose you have to kind of believe in it if you're going to go full ahead with this. Is that we've had fiat currencies in place, that we understand for a couple of thousand years, and the banking systems and everything else for hundreds of years that we're kind of used to. So we're going to a completely different era now, and if those return on interest that we see through cryptocurrencies over the past 4 or 5 years carry on happening, and if all of the gurus that are predicting that, for example, Bitcoin is going to go to 500,000 in 5 years' time, then even buying a bit of Bitcoin today is going to make you quite wealthy, in the future, come the next 3 to 5 years. That is a pivotal time to be looking at cryptocurrencies. So I would say that the other ways of investment are always going to be there. And whether cryptocurrencies or crypto assets will take the lead, if it's trusted, if people are, trust it as much as they do anything else they've ever been investing in, I know where I'd be investing, because if the return on investment goes up to that level, I'm not going to buy property and gain 6 or 7% per annum when I can buy crypto and gain 1,000% per annum, so that would be a no-brainer. So it's all about the trust element over the next few years as to whether people will surge more towards the investment into crypto. But as it looks at the moment, it's without a doubt that would be the way forward. So
it looks like regulation then, and I know in the EU we have the markets and crypto assets regulation.
Yes,
and working its way forward. That maybe is the turning point. That then allied by adoption and use by the big organizations and the big institutions that we know and trust.
Yes, yeah. There's always
that kind of turns the corner on the trust issue.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's going to be always a double-edged sword with regulation, because if you understand blockchain and digital currency, it's all been based on decentralization. So cutting out like the central governing bodies, peer-to-peer networks, disintermediated, so taking out third parties like banks and just sending transactions between one person to another, so trustless systems and things like that, which all of that works on. That's how it's been built up. So of course, when you start inviting once again the bigger banks and the centralized institutions and things like that into the mix, it starts to become a little bit more centralized again. But personally, I mean, I talk to people that are dead against the banks being involved and it becoming more centralized again. And then I've got people that say, well, for regulation and for things to happen and move forward, this has to happen. So I think I think they already really are finding a happy medium with this. If you look at the moment, the FCA in the UK, they're actually putting cryptocurrencies into a segment rather than kind of creating some kind of regulation around it. They're categorizing what cryptocurrency is, or they're actually calling it to actually enable it to be in the market. They categorize it as a crypto asset. Cryptocurrency at the moment for the FCA doesn't actually exist. It's a digital asset, So yeah. In place, I think that's going to be more the way forward, is to put the legislation in place and categorize what this actually is, as opposed to kind of writing in and changing laws, trying to make it more centralized again. Probably isn't going to work for what this actually is.
Yeah, no, you're right. The regulation is a double-edged sword, and you do see a lot of market participants and stakeholders push and really be keen for regulation, because it does have to address the trust issue. But wait and see what happens in the regulatory cycle. Naturally, it increases the barriers to entry, brings up the standards, brings up the costs, and at some point, not too far down the tracks, you will then have the same stakeholders and participants argue that the regulation is too strict and too strong and too much in compliance, and thus it ever was and will be. But I think to have that level of acceptance and maturity, you are talking about being regulated, and that is the regulated game.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I mean, for me, it's essential. It's essential to bring in when we're talking about larger kind of trust funds, hedge fund companies. There are crypto hedge funds out there. They've managed to kind of create products that that some people are happy to go into. The big boys out there, the Warren Buffetts, the Michael Saylors, they're all bigging up crypto. And of course, they're involved in, the bigger hedge fund companies. BlackRock, another example, they're well into crypto now. They're buying lots of Bitcoin. They're creating hedge funds that are crypto hedge funds only, so they've, for want of a better word, they've wangled their way around some kind of legislation. I think like the legislation is kind of there on paper for the kind of the people in the middle, the people like me that want to see, that want to trust it a lot more, want to see banks getting involved. The bank that I've maybe have been with for 20, 30 years, these guys are doing it now, so it's got to be worth it. What if they say it's great, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be, so that's when you kind of want to see a little bit more kind of, legislation and regulation on paper. But I think the bigger companies, they just kind of work their way through it, just so they can get something out there.
Yeah, but the benefit of having the big names in there that we've heard of is that they're the ones with the muscle and the resources to properly assess risks and bring that maturity that you have from an organization that's used to putting clients first as opposed to other interests and used to being in a regulated space.
Yes.
And so they can, as I said, they can bring that muscle to really moving the industry along and moving it to somewhere that people feel like they can trust, and it's an asset that market, but you're not going to lose out because of market failures like infrastructure failures or fraud or whatever it is.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you look at the kind of the things, there's a really good kind of line of existence from when cryptocurrency started, or Bitcoin in general, of what people were saying at specific times over the last sort of 11 years. And at one point, about 9 years ago, Bitcoin was only used by fraudsters and money launderers and terrorists, and that was pretty much what Bitcoin apparently was used for. I mean, I wasn't in the space at that time, so I don't really know. So it's kind of moved on. It's already moved on a long way. But the great thing about the whole industry, and even though we're starting to see this surge with the adoption of countries, I mean, El Salvador is now using it as a currency. You can buy things with it, with Bitcoin. And big companies like MasterCard and Visa, again, are adopting it as well. We're still only at 5% world adoption of cryptocurrency, whether that's in the investment space or just the general public that walk up and down the streets, whether it's in that space. Company adoption. I mean, the bigger banks, they're 50% of the world banks, as I said, they're starting to look at cryptocurrency, which is a very good thing. But still, we're at the bottom end of that upward curve with regards to crypto. So, there's still a hell of a long way to go, especially with regards to regulation and legislation. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's going to be big rises in the market, big drops in the market, but that is the journey that if you choose to take it, the volatility is going to be there. But hey, I mean, if you look at any type of investment other than, I suppose, simply leaving your money in the bank, there's always going to be some kind of element of risk, which gives you the higher potential yields that you would prefer to go with,
Yeah, well, plenty to chew over there.
Yes.
And wonder about for the future. One last question, Nick. Outside of cryptocurrencies, do you find investors are asking about or interested in other types of digital assets as investment opportunities? NFTs?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, it's all coming to the fore now as, we're talking about NFTs, ETFs, so, the great thing with an NFT is the fact of that you can buy things like digital art or all these different types of they're still non-tangible because they're digital, but nevertheless it's something that people can look at. So we're still in the realms of cryptocurrency at the moment and trying to get people's heads around that. But again, it comes down to the techies, the geeks, the people that are already encompassed into this industry that are fast forwarding at a rate of knots all of these new different ways of investing into crypto assets and other different ways. So the talk is only just starting with that. And there will be investors that will jump across from crypto and go straight into NFTs, for example, and buying digital art and all these other different ways of and tokens. So, buying tokens with, digital art and NFTs and cryptocurrency all under one token, so diversifying a portfolio with all other different types of digital production or digital products within them.
Wow. Plenty to take in there, Nick.
Yes, a lot to take in.
Very much for your time. Very much appreciate it. Quest listeners, do check out Ashton Talks Crypto if you want to tune into Nick's own podcast and the work he's doing around education on all things crypto and crypto investing. Listen, Nick, thank you very much for your time.
I've loved it. Thanks very much, Danny, for inviting me on.
And thank you very much, Quest podcast listeners, for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the Quest podcast.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.